Grizzlies.
This was the moment that was supposed to change everything for the New Orleans Pelicans franchise after they knew they were going to be losing their franchise player in Anthony Davis, gaining a new franchise player, a generational talent, a player that most believed to be the greatest prospect since LeBron James. Zion Williamson would bring the Pelicans back to relevance, and after executing a blockbuster trade with the Lakers to send Anthony Davis to LA in exchange for multiple picks, including the Lakers' own number 4 pick from the 2019 draft, as well as young players like Lonzo Ball, Josh Hart, and Brandon Ingram, the stage was set for the Pelicans to have one of the brightest young cores in basketball and a team they could build to contend with for years to come. Or so they thought. Because while the Pelicans would now have more talent than they ever had surrounding Anthony Davis, the Pelicans would only go to the playoffs twice in 6 years and see a first-round exit in both of those playoff appearances. Multiple injuries to Zion Williamson, some players falling below expectations, letting Lonzo Ball go as a restricted free agent, coaching changes, and missing on key draft selections have put the Pelicans in a place where they've never been able to truly contend. And now, with injuries plaguing most of their team, from their best players to their key role players, the Pelicans have now found themselves sitting at the bottom of the Western Conference with little to no way out. This, of course, coming off one of their more successful seasons in years, having won 49 games in the regular season and going all in and making a big splash in the offseason to build on that success in getting them to the next level by trading for DeJounte Murray. The young talent and core they once had is now getting older, no longer with the team, or they can barely stay on the court consistently season to season. So where do the Pelicans even go from here? A team that is currently last in the Western Conference and yet again with no return in sight from Zion Williamson. Well, let's talk about it. As always, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe if you like this type of content. Now, after the Pelicans got bounced in the first round of the playoffs last season to the number 1 seeded Oklahoma City Thunder, getting swept in 4 games, David Griffin, the Pelicans executive, vowed that they needed to see some change and they clearly are not ready or in a position to contend despite their regular season success. And so in the offseason, the Pelicans, like I mentioned, made a big trade in landing the Atlanta Hawks guard DeJounte Murray, where they would send the Hawks Dyson Daniels, EJ Liddell, Larry Nance, and Cody Zeller, as well as 2 first-round picks, including the pick in 2025 that is owed to them from the Lakers as part of the previous Anthony Davis trade deal. The idea was to get the Pelicans a true point guard that plays defense at a high level to facilitate and be that floor general that they needed to open up more opportunities for Zion, CJ McCollum, and Brandon Ingram. Unfortunately, though, DeJounte Murray would go down with an injury after the season opener and has since yet to return after being sidelined for 6 to 8 weeks. And things would get worse for the Pelicans as once again, Zion would get injured just a week later and has been out of the lineup since November 6th with an unclear timeline for his return. Herb Jones would go down with an injury after the first week of the season, hasn't played since October 29th. Brandon Ingram more recently has been in and out of the lineup. Trey Murphy, who they just extended to a big contract, he was out to start the year, has since returned, but hasn't been shooting the ball well like we're used to seeing. It's safe to say that the Pelicans have had some very unfortunate luck to start the season, and with the way things are trending in the Western Conference with such little margin for error, it is going to be a very rough hill to climb for the Pelicans to even get into the play-in territory, even if they can get fully healthy. But the bigger problem to me, more than anything, more than giving up future assets for DeJounte Murray, more than extending Trey Murphy to a big long-term contract, more so the impending free agency of Brandon Ingram and the possibility of seeing him walk in free agency for nothing, is the future of Zion Williamson, a player they were dying to get in the 2019 draft lottery after landing the number 1 pick, to now being in a place where they need to answer the tough question of whether or not it makes sense to continue to try and build around this guy and doubling down on their investment in him after signing him to a rookie max extension. Zion Williamson, since being drafted into the league in 2019, has played in 190 games in his NBA career. He missed his rookie season, most of his rookie season, was out his entire 3rd season, and has since been out of the lineup everywhere in between. He's played in 45% of his total available games since joining the NBA, less than half of his now year 6 NBA career. There are guys from the 2021 draft class, guys who entered the league 2 years after Zion, who have played in more games than he has. Keegan Murray, who was drafted in 2022, 3 years after Zion, has played in nearly the same amount of games as Zion has. And look, injuries are part of the game. For the most part, a player can't help or control their injuries, but the reality is, at just the age of 24, Zion is showing that he is one of the most injury-prone players in the game of basketball, a player who very much relies on his athleticism to be great. It's not like this is a player in their 30s who is now injury-prone and past their prime, or a player who is still effective and efficient despite losing their athleticism. No, you're talking about one of the most gifted athletes this generation of basketball has ever seen, a player so explosive and dominant with his strength and finishing ability at the rim. If he loses that because of so many injuries to his body, then what? He's not a good shooter. In fact, he's a poor shooter. He's a decent defender, but isn't exceedingly good at defense. He's a great rebounder because of his leaping ability and athleticism, so that would fall off by the wayside as well. And while he's a decent ball handler and can create for himself, he's also very susceptible to turnovers. And look, in the limited games we've seen Zion play this season, he just hasn't looked that good. Poor shot selection, hasn't been as efficient on offense, negative net rating, slow to get back on defense. To me, he has lost a little bit of that explosiveness, that quick first step. And what gets me more than anything when it comes to Zion is just that he does not seem fully into it. He doesn't seem to have that competitive edge, that fight, that motivation, dog-like mentality, whatever you want to call it. He is not all in. And you can tell by his demeanor on the court, and honestly by the way he takes care of himself. Like one of the most gifted athletes in the league, but it almost seems like he's taken that for granted, that he doesn't need to work as hard, that he doesn't need to continue to perfect his game, that he'll take games off here and there if he doesn't feel right. And if I'm the Pelicans, I'm looking around and saying, is this the guy we want as our franchise player? Still young, still incredibly talented, but does he actually want to be here? Does he actually enjoy playing basketball, or is he here for the check? And if it feels more like the latter, it might be wise for the Pelicans to cut their losses and move on from Zion. And if you're moving on from Zion, it might be time to go on a fire sale and tear everything down. Try and extract whatever value you can in a trade for Brandon Ingram on an expiring deal. See if you can get a contender to bite on him. Flip DeJounte Murray to the highest bidder. There will be teams that will want him. Try and move on from CJ McCollum, who is still a well-valued and respected guard in the league. And then see what you can get for Zion. It's not going to be much, let's be honest, not for a player on a max deal, but as a part-time basketball player. But you never know. Maybe there will be that one team that just can't look away from the potential and talent of Zion Williamson. And then if you go down that route, trade your most valuable assets, you're in the best position possible to land the #1 pick in this year's draft, especially since you already got a head start on all the other teams with a 4-14 start of the season. Start over, start fresh, and maybe, just maybe, like in 2019, you'll exchange one franchise player for another yet again. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.